use the word crush. You want to crush liberal dominance. So I would like to return to the word crush, because crush is a serious word. Crush is the word of somebody who intends to win.
Now, you focused on the idea of crushing liberal dominance.
Yes, yes.
The word crush relates to the word dominance for me. We live in a free country, and it's okay to have left ideas or right ideas. It's okay within both of those movements to have variations on what your philosophy is. What I don't want to see in this country is dominance by the left. I want to see a country where right, center, and left have a fair shot at getting their ideas presented and at getting what they want achieved.
Welcome to Peter Robinson, Unbridled, filming today in Washington, D.C. My guest is Leonard Leo. If you Google on Leonard Leo, you will quickly get the impression that Leonard Leo is a prince of darkness. As you are about to learn, he is anything but. Peter Robinson, Unbridled with Leonard Leo.
Because it's our duty to speak in this place of freedom. If you seek peace, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
A few headlines. The Free Press, the man who rebuilt the Supreme Court. The Wall Street Journal, the conservative trying to shift America rightward. The New York Times, Leonard Leo pushed the courts right. Now he's aiming at American society. Your grandfather came to this country from Italy at the age of 14 and went to work as a tailor. What would he make of the life that his grandson Leonard is leading today?
Well, I hope he would think it's a life well lived. I think that he would care more probably about my personal life than my professional life, because he was a person who cared very deeply about family. So I think he would be satisfied that I'm using the talents that God gave me, but he would want to make sure that first and foremost I was a good husband and father.
All right. And by the way, we have many friends in common. As far as I know, you are a very good husband and father. How many children?
We've had 7 children.
7. You lost one.
Yes.
And you have now how many grandchildren?
We have 5.
All right. Somewhere above, your grandfather is delighted. Leonard, you earned your undergraduate and law degrees from Cornell. You clerked for Judge Randolph on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, very prestigious court, the most important court by most accounts after the Supreme Court itself.
They like to think of it that way.
Here is the next correct move for a kid who grew up in Monroe Township, New Jersey. Either to go into Manhattan and go to work for a big law firm, and if you had done that, by now you'd be a senior partner pulling down huge amounts of loot every year, or to go off and pursue advanced degrees in the law and to set yourself up as a legal scholar, and by now you would have become the next Antonin Scalia. Instead, almost right away, you went to work for what was then an obscure not-for-profit called the Federalist Society. Why? What were you thinking then?
Well, I loved the practice of law, and I really thought seriously about going back into law firm life. In fact, I was interviewing with law firms during the second half of my clerkship on the D.C. Circuit.
So option A did appeal to you?
It kind of appealed to me. It was more that it was what I felt I needed to do as someone with a law degree having gone through a top clerkship. I mean, the judge for whom I clerked, Judge Randolph, was a lawyer's lawyer. He had argued 30-some cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, won every one of them. He was a major practitioner in Washington, D.C. I felt that was what you did, right, when you went to a really good law school and had a really great clerkship. And then in the midst of all of that, the Federalist Society came to me and said, you know, the student affairs in our organization are going really, really well, but the lawyer's side of the shop is flailing.
By the way, we better take just a moment to explain what the Federalist Society is, what it was then.
Sure. It's basically the arm of the conservative legal movement. So it's an organization of law students, lawyers, other legal professionals dedicated to the idea that the state exists to preserve freedom and that constitutional structure, the separation of powers, federalism, a restrained judiciary are ultimately what preserve our freedom and dignity.
All right. And so how did you make that decision?
Well, I started by talking to a few different people. I went to my mentor in college, who was Professor Jeremy Rapkin, who told me I should go make money. And I walked out of that conversation not feeling satisfied, so I kept on looking for the answer I really wanted, which was to join the Federalist Society. And that happened when I talked to Clarence Thomas. And at the time, he was a judge on the D.C. Circuit, and I went to see him, and I said, because he was just down the hall, right? I was clerking for Judge.
You hadn't got to know him while you were
Yes.
All right.
And I said, I'd like to do this, but it's a little bit unconventional. What do you think? And he told me about his own life story, much of which you can see in his book, My Grandfather's Son, or Created Equal. And he said, you're called to do certain things in life, and when that call comes, the right thing to do is to go for it. And if you're really called to do it, things will work themselves out. It will move in the right direction. That doesn't mean it'll be easy. That doesn't mean there won't be some failure, but things will generally move in the direction they're supposed to. And that conversation was really, for me,
That was it.
in addition to talking to my wife, Sally, and making sure she thought it was a good idea. Those were the two conversations that put me over the edge and brought me there.
All right. Leonard, if Google on you and all kinds of things come up, one of which is the word crush. You have said in several places, and materials associated with your organizations use the word crush. You want to crush liberal dominance. So I would like to return to the word crush, because crush is a serious word. Crush is the word of somebody who intends to win. When Clarence Thomas was nominated for the Supreme Court in 1991, you just explained that you got to know him when you were clerking for Judge Randolph. Clarence Thomas was nominated from the D.C. Circuit to the Supreme Court, and you helped to participate. You did some research in his confirmation hearings. What effect, I guess I'm just asking flat out, was that a radicalizing moment for you? What effect did those hearings have? Went on for 10 days, the entire nation watched, and it was a 10-day effort to try to smear a good man. Honestly, that's my judgment. Other people may disagree, but that is my judgment. What effect did that have on your thinking?
Well, that had an enormous impact.
It did.
It was really two confirmation hearings that in tandem had an enormous impact on me. The first one was Robert Bork's in 1987. I was a first-year law student at the time, and so I was seeing what was going on there. And that gave me, for me personally, a bird's eye view into what the left really believed and how determined they were to upend the rule of law and the Constitution as our founders understood it. Mm-hmm. The Clarence Thomas hearings, which followed on several years later, were in certain respects a continuation of that. So the left still had the same basic agenda. But what was added to that in a way that was much more pervasive and much greater than during the Bork hearings was the politics of personal destruction. I mean, they were looking to destroy Clarence Thomas forever and to seriously disincentivize anyone from trying to embrace the principles and ideals that he had, particularly anyone of his race, but beyond that. So those two events were very transformational for me because they introduced to me what the left really believed in. I mean, I knew a little bit about that from going to college, but what the left really believed in, the zeal with which it believed in it, and operationally how they went about their business, right? What did they do? How did they build their movement? How do they operationalize and weaponize their ideas and principles? So it was a serious moment for me, both in terms of having a perspective on what the left's principles were and how those were anathema to what I believed in, but also just operationally, how do they go about the business of winning, right? Now, you focused on the idea of crushing liberal dominance.
Yes, yes.
The word crush relates to the word dominance for me. We live in a free country, and it's okay to have left ideas or right ideas. It's okay within both of those movements to have variations on what your philosophy is. What I don't want to see in this country is dominance by the left. I want to see a country where right, center, and left have a fair shot at getting their ideas presented and at getting what they want achieved. And if the system is stacked in some way, shape, or form that allows the left to be the dominant player in our cultural, legal, political, and policy spaces, for me, that's a problem. And that's what I want to crush. I want to create that level playing field, and I want to see conservative ideas have an opportunity to flourish if that's what the people want. And I'm very confident that ultimately conservative principles are principles that would be embraced by most Americans if they had an opportunity to learn about them, see how they worked, and embrace them themselves.
I want to go to your philanthropy today, but I remember those days. The question of how the left operationalized its views. You mentioned that the Bork hearings came first, and it happens that I was a young speechwriter in the Reagan White House in 1987 during those hearings.
Sorry, I didn't know that. That's great.
And what was so striking was that the White House, which after all is the summit of the Republican Party operations under Ronald Reagan, was taken completely by surprise. As I recall, the previous, wasn't it Justice Scalia who was confirmed just before, he was the last before Bush.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was confirmed by a vote of 98-0. So this old tradition of bipartisan presidents consulting, making sure that if they could, they would nominate someone acceptable to both parties, and it would be a relatively non-controversial if the judge in question were qualified, knew the law, both parties would vote for that judge. Justice Scalia, 98-0. And then came the Bork nomination, and the White House was totally taken by surprise. The public advertising against Judge Bork, Senator Kennedy standing up in the chamber, the Senate chamber, and frankly, just telling one lie after another about that. Exactly right. And so what's striking to me now, this hadn't occurred to me before, is that there's a White House. Ronald Reagan is long gone. The White House that was taken totally by surprise, those people are gone. I mean, I'm still around, but I was a kid at the time. You were a kid too. And you came in just at the get-go and saw what happened. I'm putting this to you if it's a fair characterization of your thinking or of your response. Saw what happened to Judge Bork, saw what happened to Clarence Thomas, and said, A, that's not right, and B, I intend to fight back. Fair?
Yes.
All right.
Very fair. The whole idea was to say, okay, how do we, weaponize and operationalize what we believe in? How do we build our movement so that we can win? And look, the fact of the matter is that, to their credit, the left did a great job of building a movement around the opposition of Robert Bork and Clarence Thomas. They've written about it. There's a book called The Battle for the Bork nomination, where they talk about how they did all of this. So it's all about building pipelines of talent, building networks. It's all about figuring out how to bring your philosophy and ideas together with best-in-class public affairs and grassroots. It's operationalizing what you do. It's an entrepreneurial approach to politics and public policy that the left developed over a period of many, many years. If you want to learn about how the left thinks in this regard, One of the books that I read in college, which was extremely influential for me, was Piven and Clowert's Poor People's Movements, which was basically a digest of how the left won the civil rights and welfare rights campaigns. And it's those principles and those operational ideas that got taken out of those movements and moved into other areas like law and climate and other movements that currently dominate the left's agenda.
Right. So, again, I'd like to come to your current philosophy, but to sum up, you spent more than 2 decades with the Federalist Society, almost 3, I think, right? Decades with the Federalist Society. Right. Federalist Society chapters of conservative or originalist students at every law school in the country. And when Donald Trump runs for president the first time, Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society help him assemble a list of judges from whom he pledges to choose when Supreme Court nominations come along. And we now have a court on which, depending on how you count them on any given day, either 6 or 5, but in one way or the other, a majority of justices are originalist. And that is, it is many things, but it is a triumph of year after year of work in building, in operationalizing the Federalist Society, just as you explained.
It's absolutely a great testament to the growth of the conservative legal movement and its ability to operationalize its beliefs. But it's also really important to recognize that the political ingredients had to be there for this to manifest itself.
Donald Trump had to win, for example.
He had to win, and he had to make a commitment to make the judicial issue, right, a real principal plank of his office as president. And he did that, and he fulfilled that promise in a way that was about as bold and audacious and complete as one could have ever imagined. It really was a priority for him. So it was the constellation of both many, many years of building a movement, being principled and courageous about it, and then having the right political dynamics and the right political leader who was willing to basically harness that energy and run with it. And all of that was there in 2016. Well, and of course, Justice Scalia passed away.
Yes.
And let's not forget that happened in February of the presidential year. It happened on the day before the first Republican presidential primary debate. So
the whole nation was thinking about the court.
Yeah, and so it's a combination of really those things which led to where we are.
Your current philanthropy. I'd like to hear you talk about the way you think about the way you engage in philanthropy. And I'm quoting, I have remarks you delivered a couple of years ago to the Ethics and Public Policy Center that I found fascinating. I'm going to quote a couple of times. Here's one quotation. This is you. Conservative philanthropy began by funding the development of ideas and policy. Now it is time to place an emphasis on strategies that operationalize ideas, supporting activism. So if we can take both parts of that. The conservative movement began with ideas and policy. What do you mean by that?
Every movement begins in what I call an ideation phase, where the movement has to think about what it believes in, why it believes in it, how those beliefs affect how you think about current problems, how those beliefs affect what kinds of solutions you want to forge to solve those problems. Every movement starts that way. That's the ideation phase of a movement's life cycle. Usually that manifests itself by making a commitment to significant resources in areas of education, and the development of your ideas and sort of the intellectual class. So for the left, for many years, that was infiltrating the universities. It was building, quote, think tanks, which is where they started with. And for the conservative movement and the right, that's how the ideation phase started as well. But at some point in a movement's life cycle, it's time to pivot. Now, that doesn't mean that you abandon the development of ideas and testing those ideas and thinking about your philosophy. You don't ever abandon that, but you devote fewer resources to that project, that enterprise, and more resources to operationalizing what you believe in. In other words, building winning ventures, building winning campaigns. And that means not just being a policy wonk, right? Not just being someone who cares about a particular issue, but knowing how to put lead on target, making your movement, making your efforts the tip of the spear. And that means blending, right, some of the intellectual pursuits that we love, blending those with those very practical skills and talents that you have to win. And that means proper communication, proper mobilization, an understanding of technology and entrepreneurship, right? Marketing, research and opposition research, all of the things, the practical things that are really important to building a winning enterprise.
All right. So we live in a 21st century democracy.
Oh, and by the way,
Yeah.
the problem, right? The problem for the conservative movement is the left got there, okay? It jumped from the ideation phase to the operational phase. The right, the conservative movement, hasn't gotten there for the most part. There are some institutions within the conservative movement that have made that leap. There are some that understand they have to, and they're figuring out how to do it. And there are still, unfortunately, a number of them that are living in the past. They're living in the ideation phase, and they don't know how to get out of it. And of course, if you really want to incentivize institutions to make that jump and make that leap, well, guess what? Money talks. Philanthropists have to learn how to use their leverage to push the movement in the direction that it needs to go.
Before we go on to operationalizing this question of ideas, this is just has baffled me for years and years and years, and you may know the answer. What went wrong in the first place? We did this show not long ago with Will Inboden. Will Inboden is now provost of the University of Texas at Austin. But before becoming provost, Will published a long article calling for reform of higher education in National Affairs magazine. And I was very struck that he included a quotation from the organization that then was the leading representative of professors, American professors. It was early 20th century, 1915 or something of that nature. And it said, universities, the idea of the university is to preserve the best of our own civilization, and therefore universities will have a conservative effect on society. This is the outfit that at that stage, 100 and some years ago, represented professors. That is long gone. But why? A, why? And B, when I was an undergraduate, I had 2 or 3 professors who were conservative, and they said, tut, do not worry. What's happened here is the 60s generation has come into academia, they'll retire. And American academia will correct itself. It will reawaken to a kind of basic sanity as these crazy people retire. That has not happened. What happened to American universities?
Well, first of all, the left did a very, very good job of infiltrating the American university and seeding it with intellectual talent that would advance a more socialist, Marxist, progressive mission. And once they infiltrated the university, they also jiggered the governing structures of those universities in ways that perpetuated the same kinds of people who are there now. So that's one problem. The second problem is, if conservatives wanted to advance their mission, then I think for periods of our history as a movement, we should have done a better job of explaining how our principles, our philosophy, our ideas are really the best way to preserve the dignity and worth of the human person. Because ultimately, that's what people want to know. They want to know that our ideas, our philosophy, recognize and empower their dignity and worth as people. And our movement didn't always stress that. And so that, I think, was a second serious problem, which is really on us as a movement rather than on the left.
The idea of conservatism, it's hard to say conservatives champion free markets too much. There's some sense in which you can't champion the free market enough. But conservatives permitted themselves to be portrayed as the capitalism raw in tooth and claw, when in fact, if you're concerned about the poor, you should want free markets. You must have the rule of law. Is this your point?
That's right.
All
Exactly.
right.
How do free markets, how do the rule of law, how does our Constitution and its structural protections preserve the dignity and worth of the human person? They do.
Right.
They do, because all of those things, coming from a Catholic or Christian background, all of those things help you become what God wants you to be. It helps you realize your calling. And ultimately, that's how your dignity and worth is advanced and preserved. And so that's the key. And there are times in the movement where we have stressed that. But the left has been most successful when they have made the connection between what they believe in and human dignity and worth. Now, in their case, right, it's oftentimes a false narrative.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
but
yes.
putting that aside, it's important to make those connections if you want to persuade and convince people.
All right. The second part of your argument, and again, I'm quoting from your remarks. On the left side of the ledger, there aren't just theories. Powerful coalitions participate aggressively in politics. You said this here. The private sector is now advancing the left agenda. Conservative philanthropy should now place much, much greater emphasis on how to implement its ideas and policies. Okay, you've already explained that. How do you as a philanthropist choose? I mean, it sounds as though you're less interested in giving money to operations that are attempting to correct the imbalance in American universities, but what are you more interested in giving money to? How do you, give us a couple of practical examples of how you think today.
Well, let's think about parts of society, and then giving to organizations that are going to do something within that part of society. So we know from history, because the left showed us this, that litigation can be a driver for social change. So I think it's really important for conservative philanthropy to think carefully and seriously about how incubation of various kinds of litigation can advance limited constitutional government and freedom. We know from experience that various parts of our social and cultural life greatly affect the way people think, the way people act, and ultimately how they're going to manifest those beliefs, politically and otherwise. Well, we as conservative philanthropists need to think more carefully about how we can affect institutions like entertainment and news and information. And then finally, we know from experience that corporate America, particularly the largest of our multinational corporations in the U.S., have an enormous impact on culture. They have used their prominence in the commercial sphere to advance ideology in various ways. We see this with the ESG and DEI movements.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So again, conservative philanthropy needs to find ways to harness organizations to push back on the cultural influence that corporations and businesses have had in that regard. Now, some of these things are very different from what conservative philanthropists traditionally funded, right? A lot of what conservative philanthropy funded were, institutions in the business of ideation
Yes.
or education, right? Or in the business of trying to combat government, right? Now, I'm not saying those two things aren't still important, because we all know that they are,
Right.
okay?
Right.
But what the conservative philanthropic movement hasn't focused on enough is how do you shift private cultural institutions like entertainment, like news, like corporate America? How do you do that? And that's where ultimately, if you want to move our country back to where it should be, you're going to have to grapple with what's going on in those spaces, and you're going to have to try to find ways to change the landscapes there.
Okay, Leonard, could I take you through a couple of entertainment entities with which I believe you're going to correct me? I mean, Lord knows there's misinformation there's fake news on Leonard Leo all over the internet. So correct me on this. But I read this and I thought, this is just fascinating, because I think of you as very intellectual, august, the Federalist Society in terms of filling seats on the Supreme Court, and now you're making movies.
Well, I'm not making
Well-
movies. You don't want me making movies. I mean, I might know a good movie if I see one, but I'm not going to be making it.
Okay, the Moving Picture Institute. This is founded in 2004 by Thor Halvorson. It produces documentaries, by and large, as far as I can tell, critical of environmental activism, political correctness on campus, and so forth. And you're with them. Is that correct?
We're very supportive of the Moving Picture Institute. They've built an absolutely fabulous incubator lab where they take young content creators and basically not only teach them how to make good film and good theatrical content, but also give them the opportunity to make their first cuts at it, their first scripts, their first short films, which is really important if you want to jump in. There's a corollary to that on the documentary side,
Right.
which is Michael and Gina Pack's Palladium Pictures, which is a great documentary shop, great incubation labs. But then you have to go beyond that, right? It's not just institutions that are sort of cultivating that young talent. That young talent then needs places to go. Now, some of them will go and cut their teeth in mainstream entertainment in Hollywood, which is good and important. So they'll go to Lionsgate or Sony or Paramount or wherever, right? But then there also need to be places where those talented conservatives can go and create values-aligned entertainment. And those are studios that are now cropping up, like Wonder Studios and Sycamore Productions and some of the things that Angel Studios do. So what you're seeing, interesting.
The Wonder Project has The House of David, which I saw,
Yes.
which is is it Netflix?
It's Amazon.
Amazon.
60 million viewers.
60 million
60
people
million.
streamed that?
Amazon just announced the creation of a Wonder Channel, so that basically their content is going to appear there, but also they're curating Amazon's library, finding all the family-friendly content that's on there and moving it onto the Wonder Channel. So you'll have this sort of space that people know is where they can find values-aligned, family-friendly entertainment. Wonder's doing great work. I mean, they just produced a movie called Sarah's Oil, which is about the first female black millionaire, Sarah Rector. They've got Young Washington coming out around the time of the 250th anniversary, which is going to be a fabulous theatrical production on Washington during the French and Indian Wars. This is positive, family values-oriented entertainment that exhibits the kinds of principles and values and enterprising spirit that America was founded upon and that cares about. And what's really great about this isn't just what production studios like that are doing, but what they're doing to help reshape Hollywood. So what's happening now is, some of the big players, legacy players in Hollywood are saying, wow,
There's a market.
wow, family values and line entertainment actually makes money,
Yeah.
and there's a market. We want to do more of that. So they're moving the entire culture in Hollywood in a slightly different direction.
So the theory would be, correct me on this one, but of course the Hollywood, my little tiny experience of Hollywood, these people are interested in money. They want, somehow or other, I guess the argument would be that the takeover of Hollywood by liberals and progressives was so total that on the whole, as a whole, there are always exceptions here or there, but as an institution, Hollywood blinded itself to a market that was always there.
Market was always there.
That was always there. And so Leonard is using philanthropy. I mean, the tricky bit for me to think through is philanthropy. I understand philanthropy when you give money to a university because you are giving money to a not-for-profit.
Yes.
But now you're giving money to help for-profit operations get started.
So it's a little bit tricky
It is.
when you're dealing with the private sector and how philanthropists go about that. But there's two very clear things that philanthropists can do, conservative philanthropists can do in this space. One is they can build pipelines of talent. So obviously to have some impact on news and information or on entertainment, you're going to need talented people. You're going to need content creators. You're going to need various kinds of people in those businesses who are values aligned and who can, move the ball forward. So you want to identify that talent, right? And you want to give them opportunities to shine. So the one thing that philanthropists can do is support groups like MPI, Moving Picture Institute, or Palladium, or the Teneo Network, which has an entertainment as well as news vertical. And you can sort of...
Teneo is an organization of young professionals.
Yeah, Teneo Network's an organization of young professionals. So you can begin to sort of build pipelines of talent that can then move into those important sectors. So that's one thing that philanthropists can do, build those pipelines of talent. Right. The second thing that philanthropists can do is they can engage in impact investing. So when you're sitting on a corpus, when you're sitting on a lot of money, right, that you're not spending all in 1 year,
right,
that needs to be invested, right? Make targeted investments that not only make you money, because as a fiduciary you have to invest to make money,
right,
not only make you money, but that also advance our cause. And that means making targeted, impactful investments in the entertainment industry or in the news industry, finding those production studios, finding those news operations that will make you money, that yield a return, but that also at the same time advance the principles that you believe in.
By the way, you spoke a moment ago about sitting on a corpus. And of course, when you type in Leonard Leo, what pops up is very public-minded, but very successful businessman in Chicago who gave your organization his company and then sold the company and turned it into over $1.5 billion. And in almost every article that I found, you're viewed as this Darth Vader of the conservative because you're so well funded. And then I looked up how much George Soros has given to his foundations over the years, and it's not 1.6 billion, it's close to 10 billion over 30 years. And then you add in, this was me I was trying to get a feel for just how big your corpus is, how big your
small in comparison to.
And the answer is, and then if you also begin to consider the extent to which federal dollars were captured by the left, we saw this again and again when Doge was going through USAID, money was being, federal taxpayers' dollars, huge amounts. All right, Leonard, I have bad news for you. You're actually a piker.
Yep, well, that's right.
Does it feel overwhelming? Truly, does it feel overwhelming?
Conservative philanthropy in general is a piker, but so is David.
All right.
So here's the thing. First of all, there are two things we have going for us. One is we're right. We know what the truth is, and I think when people follow their natural instincts, they understand what truth and good really is. The good and truth are not hard to discover, and when you discover them, you can push people in your direction. So when we spend $1, right, we're spending it to promote the truth. And we have to spend a lot less money to promote what's true and good and natural than someone who is promoting what is false and unnatural and bad. Okay, so number one, you need less money to do that. You still need a lot of money, but you need less of it. Secondly, we're better at spending it. In other words, if you look at
You're looking for a slingshot. You're aware that you're David.
That's right, and you've
Right.
got to use the tools you have, and you have to use them really effectively against Goliath. And the way you do that is you're very entrepreneurial, you're very nimble, you're very effective, and so we put a premium on that. So for every $1 we spend, the left probably has to spend $6 to $8 to do the same thing. And so, that's how we survive, right? Now, would I like to have 10 billion instead of 1.6? Sure, why not? But you do the best with what you've got, and I think we're doing a reasonably decent job of it. We can always do better.
All right. Conservatism today. Donald Trump has dominated the scene for a decade, but 3 years from now he will not be here any longer. And here's a Manhattan Institute just published a poll showing that 17% of Republicans, mostly younger Republicans, hold opinions that you just have to call anti-Semitic. By the way, the figure among Democrats is 20%, so it's not as if it's worse in the Democratic Party. Where does this come from? You're of an age so that you grew up under Ronald Reagan and Antonin Scalia and Mr. Justice Clarence Thomas, and this is nowhere in conservatism as George Bush or Ronald Reagan or Clarence Thomas understands conservatism. Where is this stuff coming from?
Well, I think it comes from the same place that this stuff has always come from throughout the course of human history. Unfortunately, those ideas emerge when the younger generations have a sense of despondency or hopelessness. That's been the case throughout the course of Western civilization. When that idea of despondency or hopelessness arises, when it looks like you don't have much of a future, when you feel like you can't trust most governing and cultural institutions, unfortunately, you are tempted to divert to those kinds of extreme ideas, and that, I think, is what has happened. We have a generation of younger people who particularly post-COVID, have had this sense.
COVID did something, didn't it?
Oh, I think it definitely did. A decline in beauty in our culture. Right? There's a coarseness in our culture that didn't always exist to the extent it does today. Coarseness was always there. So a decline in beauty, an increase in distrust of institutions, a double standard, right? So, you're locked down and can't go to school, but, you can have
march.
George Floyd protests, okay? And so all of this creates a cognitive dissonance, a sense of despondency and some enmity, right? And that's when those feelings are there, that's when the forces of darkness can come in and make you embrace things that are just disgusting.
So what does that mean for your philanthropy? If we've got a moment, I mean, you just made a very good case that the time has come to operationalize, and yet it seems as though conservatism today faces a moment, something like the moment it faced in the 1950s, when William F. Buckley, Milton Friedman, and others devoted an enormous amount of their time and attention simply to defining what conservatism was and what it was not. And now we've got protectionism versus free traders. We've got this horrible poison of anti-Semitism creeping in. There are fights over visas. Everybody agrees the border should be closed to illegal immigration, but we've got the the tech crowd that wants the H-1B visas versus the MAGA crowd that wants very limited limit. In other words, there are schisms throughout what you'd have to at least broadly refer to as what remains of the conservative movement. And it's going to, I mean, it feels to me as though it's going to require an enormous act of discipline, a concerted effort over some years to redefine or reassert, maybe the better word, conservatism at its best. Does that strike you as right? And what does that mean for you, for the way you conduct your professional life?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I mean, first of all, this isn't the first time that the conservative movement has had fissures within it. And it won't be the last. No. And the left has the same problems that we have in this kind of growingly coarse society. They have very similar fissures like we do. There are fringe elements.
There are anti-Semites on that side for sure.
A whole bit. But what do you do about it? Well, first of all, we have to convince, I think, younger generations that the coarseness and nihilism, the win at all costs sort of tactics and philosophy that they seem to embrace are really corrosive and ultimately not in line with the good that they embrace, which is an understanding of the dignity and worth of the human person. We have to make it clear that there is a tension there that exists that needs to be reconciled. A lot of these younger people, I think, view where we're at as sort of a Spanish Civil War moment, okay, and that didn't end well for anybody.
No,
and we have to remind them of that. So that's one thing. If we can pull back a little bit on the coarseness, on the sort of nihilism that we see, I think that would be very, very helpful. Secondly, we have to get back to basics. What does it actually mean to be a conservative? And I think it's really simple. It's not that hard. And when you think about it, a lot of people actually embrace these things. They just haven't thought about it very carefully. It's an appeal to custom and tradition. It's a commitment to the rule of law and to process.
By the way, Leonard, we've seen the rise of so-called common good conservatism, and it varies. Patrick Deneen, Adrian Bermuda,
Sure.
These are very bright people who are, and it takes different forms. But one way of summing it up is that it displays some unease with the founding principles, and it argues that conservatives should use government less to protect individual liberty than to promote its own causes, limiting corporate power, protecting the middle class, and so forth. Now, you're a practicing Catholic, so I know you're not a values-free conservative, but I've read everything I can find. I've never heard anything that sounded like common good conservatism out of you. You stand by the Constitution. You stand by individual liberty. Is that correct?
I stand by those things, but I would also say that when it comes to values and ethics and morality, there's very little daylight between common good conservatives and sort of what I would call the more sort of traditional conservative circles that I've traveled in my whole life. Right. We share many of the same principles and values. The difference is really on how to get the job done.
All right.
Okay, in my view. And when you think about that, my own personal view is that if you want to have lasting and more permanent cultural transformation, and you want a society and culture that embraces the values that we believe in, the best way to do that is largely by reshaping private institutions. And that's why we in our philanthropy are spending so much time dealing with news media, online influence, entertainment, corporate America. We're putting pressure on those private and cultural institutions to move in a different direction. That is, politics and public policy are all downstream from that. And so that's how we want to get it done. I don't ultimately believe that if you tried to harness, for example, if you tried to harness the administrative state to adopt
That's the
certain
idea
of
in
your
some
principles,
quarters, yes.
okay, that might temporarily fix the problem here or there. It is not a long-term solution because anything that we do to grab the reins of the state, okay, the left is going to do, and it's going to do it 10 times better than we are, okay? So that's not a long-term solution to the problem. And of course, the most extreme version of this, which is a confessional state, has never worked in human history for very long. So again, I understand why young intellectuals are attracted to this because they are disappointed with the kind of progress that's been made and with the speed with which it's been made.
Right.
But I'll tell you, when you focus on the culture, you can achieve a lot in short periods of time.
I want to move on to other material, but you spoke of, you're speaking of social issues. Dobbs, 2022, Dobbs comes down, it overturns Roe versus Wade, which has been on the books for 49 years. And what happens?
That sounds like winning to me, by the way.
Okay, hold on. Sounded that way to me too at first. And then it returns the question of abortion to state legislatures. And in state after state after state, we get constitutional amendments or very rigorous statutes passed, making abortion, enshrining abortion in a way that it hadn't been. Ohio, for example, which is a conservative state. It used to be a sort of bellwether, could go either direction, but Ohio is now quite solidly a red
So
state.
why is that?
And that's exactly, and Ohio, they have a constitutional amendment making abortion in some ways even more protected now than it was before Dobbs. So what's going on?
The answer is obvious. Because the movement didn't focus on the culture.
Okay.
It was handed this, look, when we set out to transform the judiciary, we didn't say, this is the magic pill. You take this pill and all your problems are going to be solved. No. Having the right courts is just an insurance policy, okay? It's just a way of buying time. Ultimately, you have to transform the culture. So yeah, Roe v. Wade was overturned, thankfully, right? Great job. Got a great court, got it done. Okay, good. Thank you for President Trump and the others who made that happen.
Justice Alito, who wrote the decision, right?
Yes, okay. But the fact of the matter is that nobody had a plan. And through all those years when we were battling Roe v. Wade, the cultural issues weren't addressed. There wasn't a positive message about the culture of life, about how to deal with women in need, okay? So it's not until now that people are beginning to learn, for example, about what a pregnancy resource center even is, even though they've been around for years, okay? So you can't just expect a governing institution to make a change and then suddenly everything's going to be all right. You have to shift the culture. And that's why when you think about philanthropy in the context of things like ESG and DEI and other aspects of race and culture, right? You need to think about putting pressure on cultural institutions. You need to think about creating positive messages for culture to embrace. It's not just about government. Now, that doesn't mean government doesn't have a role to play, because it does, okay? There are things that are going on right now that are very positive and very good in the DEI and ESG space. But you know what? That didn't start with government action. That followed already existing private action to destroy those structures that were perpetuated by BlackRock and other multinational corporations.
Leonard Leo, you're a little more complicated than I suspected. You don't just want to crush liberal dominance. You want the country to be good.
Well, that's the idea, yeah. The idea is to create the good.
All right. Listen, let me try out a few signs of recovery. I want to see if I can make you feel hopeful here.
Okay.
Not that you need cheering up, but listen to this list. New programs at public universities. Arizona State's new School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership, University of Florida's Hamilton School for Classical.
Just cut to the UT.
Cut to UT. Okay, yeah. No. The University of Mississippi, University of North Carolina, and of course, especially close to my heart here, University of Texas, Civitas Institute, and School for Civic Leadership. Now, So here I have a question. I thought, because I'm wrong about everything, I thought for years that when the correction finally came in American universities, it had happened at public institutions such as your Cornell or my Dartmouth, and aside from Robbie George's Madison program at Princeton, not much happened in the private institutions. And now
Most schools are public.
And these schools are all public. It is the mechanism of politics. It is state legislatures saying to the universities, knock it off. Come back to the center. Give these kids an opportunity to learn something about American principles, about the founding, about what free markets have accomplished. Why is that taking place in the public institutions? More rigorous. I mean, in the public institutions, there's a real movement, and less so in the privates.
Well, I mean, as you point out, the pressure that comes to bear on a public institution is when a state has a more conservative sort of political patina, right? They can put pressure on those public universities to change because they
So politics works, even in higher ed.
Oh yeah, politics works. Absolutely. Now there are problems that we have to sort out here. You identified one, which is, well, what do you do about private institutions? And I'm not sure there's actually a very good answer to that. I'm not sure you can do very much about it, other than basically tarnish the brand of some of those top elite degrees and make it clear that actually they're not worth what you think they are. But then the other thing that's going to be a challenge for...
How many times have you appeared on the Cornell Alumni Magazine cover?
Yeah. I mean, I might have missed an issue or two, but I doubt it. The otto challenge your institution and others are going to have, frankly, is for many years we waved people off of going to get their PhDs in teaching, right? Because there was no future.
For
So now, as we stand up these new programs and centers at places like UT, there's a supply problem in terms of finding academic talent.
Good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have, but it is a problem.
It is a problem.
So we are going to have to, again, this is where ideation and the intellectual pursuits don't completely disappear. I mean,
Right.
there is some of that. We do need to probably encourage some people to pursue that calling because we do need it now.
Okay. I'd like you to take a look at a video clip, and this comes from House of David.
Oh, House of David.
Rise up, David.
For my mother.
It's a progressive establishment. The death takes forever.
Yes. It can be slow. But it happens.
But it happens. And I didn't realize that has already been seen by 60 million. So My reaction, looked at that. I thought, Leonard is conservatives every time they try something in popular culture, sort of grade B. Production values, good writing, good acting. That was an expensive scene to shoot. That was shot on depth, almost a David Lean depth in the landscape. So my first word is congratulations for having anything to do with that.
I had nothing to do with
Are
that.
you sure there's more of this to come?
Oh, there's lots more to come. You have a pipeline and bank of enormous talent in the entertainment world. These are people who are really good at what they do, and they've come to understand that, one, positive themes and messages are really important, and secondly, that quality matters.
Quality matters.
Quality
That's what's
really
impressive.
matters. And one of the great things about Wonder Studios is you've got guys like John Irwin, who's done a lot of stuff with mainstream Hollywood at Lionsgate and elsewhere, that had a great hit with Jesus Revolution. Kelly Hookstratton, who's the CEO of Wonder, who used to be top exec at Netflix. These are people who understand the industry. They understand the industry. They understand the importance of quality, and they understand what audiences want. They want positive, inspiring, family values aligned entertainment.
Honestly, one of the things I found so striking about that, I thought, why does that feel? It's the first thing I've seen in ages where the grandparents and the parents and the kids could all watch it together, and there aren't going to be any scenes that embarrass anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's the idea. The idea
Why is that so hard? No? Yeah.
Well, it's hard when you have content creators and production teams that don't know anything different from some of the sort of more unseemly cultural conditions that we've had. But you have now, this bank of talent that understands what they want for their own families, right? They want to be able to all sit in the living room and all watch a show together. And they want it to be a show that inspires and motivates and entertains. So it's not just about conveying certain values. And look, if you think about House of David, you think about the life of David, right? There's a lot to be learned there, ethically, morally, philosophically. But in your living room, you also don't want to be hit over the head with a 2x4 about it.
Right.
You want it to be indirect, subtle, nuanced, elegant, okay? And that's what that is. And by the way, House of Washington, Young Washington, wait until you see that one.
All right.
Okay.
So, Leonard, congratulations on 5 or 6 members of the Supreme Court and House of David. I want to play the card game, and then we're going to taste some wine.
Card game. Okay.
Card game. All right.
Terrible
This is
cards.
this one you'll be able to do. You're going to choose. You're going to choose 3 cards, and you choose a card and hand it to me.
I picked 3.
We're just one at a time.
Okay.
Okay. And this is yep. Thank you. Thank you. Are you more like your father or your mother? You lost your father at a very early age.
So it's hard for me to say. I think probably my mother.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. This is the wrong question to be asking Leonard Leo, but what are your vices?
What are my vices? Sometimes I'm too much of a control freak.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I like to be in control of
That's
things.
why your staff has been standing in the back of the studio with their knees knocking through this whole. No.
Sometimes you just have to trust in others, trust in God. You're not always in control, and that's okay.
All right. Last question: biking or hiking? Which I'm going to extend to say.
Oh, hiking. Hike. I don't even have to think about that one.
That's easy.
Well, yeah, because I'm horrible at riding a bike.
But how do you relax? You spend most of your time at home in Maine. How do you relax when you're there?
I like long walks.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I like long walks. I enjoy playing backgammon with the kids. So those are two things I like a lot. We're foodies, so we love
You cook?
cooking. And
You do your own cooking?
I don't cook very much, but a couple of the kids do, and my wife is a great cook, and I love being in the kitchen and being a part of that environment. So
Got it. All right, let's taste some wine.
okay.
Tell us about the wine.
All right. Well, first of all,
Every bottle there is affordable.
yeah. So you asked me, I guess, to come up with some affordable wines, and just by way of introduction, I do love wine. I think it's an important part of the food experience. There's a great history and tradition to wine.
It's a conservative
know,
drink.
It's a conservative drink. Yeah, I think probably, but I don't know. We'll have to. But I know. Well, let me put it to you this way. I mean, with regard to, for example, Burgundy, we wouldn't have Burgundy were it not for the Benedictine monks. So there you go.
All right.
The first thing I would say is, there's wine for everybody, and the most important thing is to drink what you like. Okay, so don't drink something just because it's got a fancy label or because other people like it. Drink what you like. Secondly, there are various price points, and look, there's no question that the higher you go in price, the more likely you are to probably experience higher quality, just like everything else in life. But that doesn't
Markets
mean
work even in wine.
yeah, markets work even in wine. But having said that, there are good wines at lower price points. And what you just have to do is figure out what those are and sort of how to find them. Some people do that by getting away from France and Italy and the United States and looking more at South Africa or
Chile.
or Argentina. You can do that, and that's one way of doing it. I didn't choose that route today because I'm not as competent to sort of know what to select from there. The other thing to do is pick a good wine and just know how to serve it. Okay, so these are wines all under $22 a bottle.
The most expensive bottle on that tray was $21.99. All right.
That's correct. But what we did, okay, was we opened these up 24 hours ago, and we let them breathe.
Important for reds only or for whites as well?
Reds.
For reds, all right.
Not for whites.
Not for whites.
So we did that because that's going to take some of the tannic, very acidic quality of these wines, and the aeration is going to help them open up so that you're going to have a better experience when you drink them. Because if you go down and sit down to dinner and you just open this bottle and drink it, okay, it's been in that bottle for a while. It needs to open up. I mean, I tend to like to have wines open up for 30 or 40 minutes, if not longer. I've had wines.
What's the business of decanting? Is that necessary, or
well,
is that...
it's very helpful.
It helps.
It does help a lot.
Right.
It helps a lot because it aerates the wine and aerates it quickly, because the more of the wine that's exposed to oxygen, the quicker it's going to begin to become less acidic and less tannic, and it's going to open up. You're going to sense the flavors more. So decanters, which is what you pour them into,
right.
The wider the base of a decanter, the more of the wine is exposed to oxygen.
That's why they have the wide bases. All right.
Yeah, so that's helpful. So what I did, because it's inside my comfort zone, is we selected wines from basically four areas that I'm familiar with, and one is Burgundy in France, which, as I said, is where the Benedictines first started cultivating grapes, and this is a Gamay 2023 Morgon Côte de Puy, and
2023, so it's not necessary to age a bottle for years and years and years.
Well, look, I mean, it depends on the wine. So some wines will age very well and some won't. If you're looking at price point, chances are you're probably not going to be able to afford a wine that's very old. And so what you're going to want to do with that is you're going to want to open it early, right, and let it air out. So why don't we start with this? So again, this is
never enjoyed being a host on a show more than I do right now.
So again, this is a Gamay from Burgundy, and so what you're going to sense with this, you can see first of all its color. It's not as dark and deep red. Okay, what you're going to get from a wine like this is you're going to get a lot of sort of red berry and fruit. Okay. But it's going to be a little bit lighter than say a Bordeaux or a Cabernet or something else. Right. So this is a Burgundy. This would be like so in America we would call this like a version of a Pinot Noir. Right. And this happens to be, this particular wine happens to be produced from grapes that come from pretty old vines, 60-plus-year-old vines. Burgundy is one of the earlier sort of grape regions.
Now, I have always been intimidated by what you're doing right now.
What's that?
Show me the correct way to drink red wine. You swirled it?
I do, as a matter of habit.
This is more to get the air a little bit more?
A little bit. I mean, obviously, it's not going to aerate the wine very much. That's already happened. Right. But also, when you swirl it, you're allowing some of the fumes to kind of rise up in the glass. And so you can get a sense for the nose. And the first thing you should always do is just smell it. Mm. I know some people actually who can't drink wine anymore. Sometimes when people get older, they just can't drink wine anymore, or they have a bad reaction to wine. And what they do is they just smell it.
I'm sort of that way with cigars about now. I'm perfectly content with secondhand smoke.
But you can see there's a lot of fruit.
No, just smelling it is an experience.
Not bad. Not bad for.
Okay, so tell me how did you move it from? I mean, I've heard things about you move it around your mouth from this set of taste buds to another.
This is probably not the right glass for a Burgundy. You want a bigger glass because depending on the shape of the glass, it's where the wine will hit your palate.
I see.
So a Burgundy is a less intense wine. So a wine glass that sends the wine more to the edges of your palate, which are more sensitive, is where you would want it to go. So that's how you do that. So this is, but Burgundies are I think a very approachable wine, and French wines are particularly nice because their alcohol content tends to be lower than U.S. wines.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah.
Now, Leonard, would you think of this as a wine you'd have with dinner, or is this a wine that you'd save for after dinner? You could
do this. You could do this before dinner with cheese or hors d'oeuvres, or by itself. Mm-hmm. You could. You could certainly do it with dinner. I'd probably serve this with fish or chicken.
Oh, really?
Maybe pork.
But not
depends on
not a dark meat.
Probably not beef. No, it's a little bit too light for that.
Got it.
Also, one other thing to remember is don't just drink and swallow. Right, let the wine linger in your mouth a little bit.
Right.
So that's the first one. You want to do a second one? So we're going to move to a different part of France, which is Bordeaux. Okay, and Bordeaux is usually a blend of Merlot and Cabernet. And
it's a blended one.
Yeah. Usually it's, depending on the bank, it's either 60-40 or one or the other. And this is Chateau Bellevue. Now you'll see a slight difference here. So that was more berries, okay, and cherries and that kind of thing. This is going to be more, probably more tannic, a little deeper, more acidic, but also is going to be more like stone fruit, right?
Oh, really?
So it's going to have a slightly different, and some of that's the soil, and some of that is just the the weather in these two regions of France. Do you have the taste of the other wine out of your palate?
More or less,
All
yes.
right.
yes,
So,
yes.
all right. So let's see.
So this is darker. I can tell that right
Well,
away.
you can tell,
Isn't
yeah.
it? Isn't it? Am I?
No, it's darker.
Yeah.
Not by a lot. And again, some of that is just we're dealing with younger wines, okay? And
This is what year 2022.
yeah, 2022. So it has a little barrel age on it, but not much. And these wines will improve with age. So you don't have to drink these like today. You could wait 3 or 4 years, and they'll develop and become more full bodied. Now what you should get out of this is a much deeper.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh definitely.
This is good.
I mean, if I can taste the difference.
Okay, so what would
anybody
you drink this with? What would you serve?
Oh, this I think this could stand up to beef.
Yeah, a
Couldn't
nice
it?
steak.
Yeah, this would be
nice steak.
great with a steak.
This is actually
a matter of fact,
this
it's
is
making
this
me
is actually a
100
pretty
right
good.
now.
This is a pretty good Bordeaux for a low price Bordeaux.
Leonard, could I ask? I know this is a crass question, but I'm being honest with you. I feel you're my friend. I can expose myself. Once a bottle has been opened, is there any way to put it back on the to recork it and keep it for a week
Yeah.
later? Oh, there is.
There are ways of doing it. So you can. So what you can do is there's a thing called there's a certain kind of stopper that you can buy where it's a rubber stopper and you put it on, and then there's a device that pushes the air out of the bottle.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay, so you have to take the air out because
You got to take the air out.
I see. All right.
So that's really the easiest way to do it. We do that. I mean, I find that it doesn't really work for more than 2 sittings. So what we often do is if it's just Sally and me having dinner and we can't drink a whole bottle, we'll have half that bottle, and then I'll put the stopper in it and pull the air out of it, and it will be pretty good for the next day.
Got it.
It depends on the wine. So the Burgundies will last less time. The denser, fuller wines like Bordeaux's or Cabernets, they will last a little bit longer. I find American Cabernets are really good at stretching for 2 or 3 days because they're pretty dense, full-bodied wines. Okay. Now, so you've been to Burgundy and you've been to Bordeaux, and now we're going to go to the south of France. We're going to go to Côte d'Aron, okay? And this is southern France, so it's really sun-drenched, okay? Hotter.
Sweeter.
Yeah, a lot more fruit forward.
Right.
Okay, this is going to be a lot of plum and cherry. This one in particular, which is the St. Cosma, has a little bit of a mineraliness to it because it's at a place where there's a little volcanic rock, so you get a little more mineral out of it, and a little more tannins, right? But fruit. When you go to Côte d'Aron, right, wines, it could be or Chateauneuf's. What you're getting is a much full-bodied, fruitier kind of wine because of the terroir and so forth.
When you were a boy, did your grandfather teach you about wine at the dinner table? And do you do this with your own kids? Do you talk about them?
Yeah,
You do.
and he did too a little bit.
Did he?
In fact, when I was young, he would let me have a little bit. That is part of the Italian tradition.
Right. All right.
Okay, now you gotta just smell this one. Smell the Bordeaux and smell this, and you'll see the difference.
This
This is going to be
I would describe it now. You're talking about it in terms of fruit, and I'm not adept at this as you are. But the adjective that comes to mind is brightness. There's a kind of brightness about this, by comparison with this one, which feels darker to me. And
darker, soft,
yes,
darker. Yeah, brightness is not a bad way to put it, right? Because it's got this sort of also a little flowery, right? little hint of honey
Mm-hmm.
in the notes.
Mm-hmm. I'm on my third glass of wine, and I'm feeling the urge to start talking like a Frenchman.
Well, we're going to go to Italy in a minute.
Oh, this is delicious. And there's a smoothness about this. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you're approving of my adjectives.
This is a really good value wine. For under $21,
Delicious.
to have that kind of finish on the wine is really good. And St. Cosmo is a good.
And what year is that one?
This is 2023,
2023.
so it doesn't have a lot of age on it. And again, these have been open for 24 hours.
All right.
So what you're sensing, if we open these right now and drank them, they would not taste like this.
They'd be sharper, more
They would be
acidic.
tight. You wouldn't get the fruit as much as you're getting. Okay, and that's why you want to open them up. So if it's really young and really inexpensive, 18 to 24 hours.
All right. Do you use this as a fundraising technique? Because I'm about ready to write you a check for
No, that
any
would
size you
that
would-
that would
you know.
probably be probably not a good idea to get someone drunk and then ask them for money. But what's great about wine is it's like food. We humans are wired for fellowship.
Yes,
We're
yes.
wired for fellowship. And wines and spirits do a little bit of that, as does food. So, okay, so this is Italy now. Okay, so this is a Montepulciano, and
North, south, I can't place that on the
yeah, sort of central, north of, slightly north, and this is probably slightly north and east of Rome.
All right.
Okay. Old vines from there. This is gonna so Italians were making wines before the French, but their industry was not as well developed until two families, the Gaias and the Frescobaldis, came in and really perfected Italian wine. And
Give me a century. What are we talking about?
19th, 20th.
Oh, I see. Oh,
I mean,
recently. You're
for,
not talking
for
about
a
the medieval
long time,
period.
for a long time, Italian wines were local wines, bottled with a kind of basket on it.
Right, right.
They were fine, but they weren't paying as much attention to the viticulture and other things.
Right.
They were good wines, but they weren't competing on the world market, and they are now. And Montepulciano is sort of a standby for a lot of people. It's what's interesting about the Italian wines is it has fruit, so it's going to have some plum and some red berry, but it's also going to have this kind of vanilla tobacco type flavors and scents in it as well. Again,
It's from the grape or
it's from the soil.
It's from the
soil.
From the soil.
It's going to be from the soil in this case, somewhat from the weather. You're dealing with a more southern climate. You're dealing with
More sun, somewhat higher temperatures.
yes,
than
and
certain-
you're dealing with a different sort of dirt, So, and this one is called Barba.
Leonard, to prove that you and I can talk about, we can bring politics into anything. Europe really is worth saving, isn't it?
Western civilization is always worth saving, no matter where it is. Absolutely. Some parts of it may be more challenging to save, but now this has a very different nose to it, right?
Completely different.
Yeah. There's a little bit.
Fruit is not the first.
No, it's
thought.
tobacco, vanilla,
Mhm.
leather. I think.
I mean, what a strange thing to say that a grape smells like tobacco, but there is
Yeah.
a little. Definitely.
Wet tobacco.
Yes.
I'm
but that's delicious.
getting more of the fruit than I thought.
No, that's delicious.
So
as well.
So again, It's a little bit harder to find value.
And what year is that one, if I may?
This is what year is this? 2023 also. It's French and Italian wines tend to run a little bit pricier.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit harder to find wines under $25 a bottle, in this case under $22 a bottle, but you can find them. And I just chose to go this route because this is what I know. I know France and I know Italy, and a little bit less Italy, but mostly France. But you can get really good South African wines. You can get really good Argentinian and Chilean wines.
California?
You're going to have
Do you
a
know the
hard time.
Californians?
I think personally, you're going to have a harder time finding really good California wines under $22 a bottle. I think you're better off.
It's the higher end
Yeah.
of the market.
Yeah.
I see.
But you can go to places. You can go to places like Total Wine, that have really good arrangements with distributors, and there's no middleman.
Total Wine is a website.
It's it's a retailer of wine.
Okay, so
They
they're
have
dealing
stores.
with large volumes.
They have stores as well.
Got it. All right.
Yeah, and they're dealing with large volumes, and they make really good deals with French and Italian winemakers. So you can get bottles that are not heavily marked up from them. But what I would say is, try some things. Go buy a couple of Burgundies. Go buy a couple of Bordeaux's. Get some Côte d'Arones. Those tend to be less expensive, and again, they've got really nice fruit on them. Maybe get an Italian wine or two. I think a Montepulciano is a good place to go, and then just start trying them and see what you like. And if they're young, give them 18 to 24 hours in the bottle, but take the cork out, and see what you think of them.
Leonard, thank you. And I'm going to have a conversation with your wife, Sally, because I think the next show we shoot should be in your kitchen. Yeah. Leonard, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Privileged to be here.